Let them eat cake.
That's such nonsense. I would never say that.
Marie Antoinette, this unconventional costume drama, charts the rise of a young queen and her luxuriously confining lifestyle, which ultimately led to her undoing. This is the synopsis of the famous movie by Sofia Coppola with Kirsten Dunst playing the young Austrian at the French court. Indeed, Marie Antoinette's image in the eyes of her contemporaries, and even more those who live centuries after her, is totally corrupted. A mean and greedy girl who had nothing but clothes and dancing in her mind. She robbed and ruined the nation, and no wonder all that came to such a tragic end, both for her and the country. What a perfect character for a movie, right? That's when I thought it was too good, or better to say too bad to be true, and that there must have been someone more than just a silly aristocrat who never saw what real life is. And you know what? In my research, I think I've got into something. So watch this video to learn about the real drama of the French Queen Marie Antoinette. Already met the very young Austrian Archduchess, then the newlywed Dauphine, the wife to the heir to the throne, in two of my previous videos. Having just arrived at Versailles, she somewhat controversially engages in the hatred of the king's mistress, Madame du Barry, a lose-lose game for her at the end of the day. And in the next one, she becomes the unfortunate victim of the notorious fraudsters who stole the most expensive diamond necklace ever. And again, despite being an innocent soul, she was the one to blame in the eyes of society. Welcome to watch those videos to get the full picture about the queen and the epoch she lived in. So, did you spot the pattern already? In both situations, she is not the principal actor. Everything unfolds without her and behind her back, and still, at the end of the day, she is made responsible for all the stir. How stupidly unfortunate, right? Maybe you have even met such people in your own life. Yet looks like there is a rather reasonable explanation for this phenomenon of hers. Marie Antoinette was the 15th and penultimate child of the Holy Roman Emperor Francis I and Empress Maria Theresa. All the girls in that family were raised as, may I put it straightforward, well, like beautiful, exquisite flowers. Maria Antonia, that's how they call her back in Vienna, was taught how to behave at court, how to dance gracefully. The lessons of music, posture and appearance occupied all her study time, leaving no place for, say, history, science or politics. All that was strangely considered to be redundant for a girl who was actually destined to become a queen of a state one day. No wonder when she arrived in Versailles, everybody was amazed not only by her natural beauty, but by her grace, her sense of rhythm and beautiful lines in her dances, her light-hearted character and taste for fashion and refined food. And yes, it became quickly obvious that the 15-year-old Dauphine doesn't have her own opinion when it comes to politics. So she became an easy catch for the numerous intriguers at court who tried to use the future queen in backing their own agenda. Back to that case with du Barry. Looks like the teenager Marie Antoinette was really shocked by the frivolous moral code of the French royalty. Coming from a loving family, no wonder she got surprised that the king, her new grandfather-in-law, is amusing himself with a former courtesan made countess. So it was easy to steer the course of her opinion and public behavior in the direction of open animosity toward the king's lover. On the one hand, this way she pleased some hard-boiled courtiers and old aristocrats. On the other, she provoked frustration with the king, the most important person at the court for everyone, and her in particular. It took the involvement of the Austrian ambassador, who strongly advised her to change her ways toward du Barry.
Snubbing the king's favourite is publicly criticising the king's behaviour, especially as your marriage not exactly on solid ground.
All right, she did. That's better. The king was happy, but the court smelled a rat in the Austrian princess. Yes, an important notion. When she just arrived in France, everybody immediately titled her with that nickname, the Austrian or l'Autrichienne in French. God knows why, there were foreign queens before her, but this nationality issue was stuck to her like with glue. Her French wasn't perfect at the beginning, and you know how French don't appreciate when you make mistakes when speaking their language. She preferred different food. Yet again, nowadays the puffy croissant and various viennoiseries have become the symbols of the French food culture. She was too young, too beautiful, too blonde, you name it, whatever. She was a foreigner, of course, but better to say she was labeled as a foreigner, and all the facts and the steps she took were used to prove that she indeed wanted to sell France to Austria, which was obviously a foolish idea, yet a perfect pretext for the unjustified hate from the crowds. In fact, I guess I see the reason to this fixation on her Austrian origins. Back then, in the late 18th century, the European countries were going through another set of political turbulence. For example, Marie Antoinette's mother and her father, the Holy Roman Emperor, were accused of plotting a secret alliance with Prussia and Russia against Poland, which they planned to divide into 3 parts. All that behind the back of France. So there were certain tectonic movements happening on the map of Europe, and everyone sort of lived in anticipation of the next big war and a constant threat for their own country. In fact, the proper marriage of Marie Antoinette with Louis Auguste, the future Louis XVI, was designed to seal the political alliance between Austria and France and strengthen their position against the joint ambitions of Prussia and Great Britain. And then this secret plan to divide Poland comes into light. With this perspective in mind, we can better understand the reason why she was considered an Austrian spy right from the beginning. Even the royal family, despite having close blood ties and relations, considered her a foreigner.
May you have many healthy children and produce an heir to our throne.
And yes, let's get back to her marriage. It is a well-known fact that the 2 teenagers had some problems in it. No wonder, I must say, since both Marie Antoinette and Louis Auguste were only 15 years old at the time of their marriage. Well, they had tons of problems in the eyes of royals, courtiers, and every living soul in the country. You see, they didn't manage to produce an heir for more than 8 years. Back in the day, that was considered a disaster. Everyone was a judge at that court, in the bed of the future king and queen, and everybody had their own opinion. There is no need to go into detail about why their marriage wasn't consummated for so long, yet the key takeaway for Marie Antoinette was the following: her positions were in danger, and the more time passed, the less sympathy and backing she had from the courtiers and the ever-curious public. No wonder she found herself in a really miserable mental state and personal situation. She was a young and beautiful wife, yet her husband had no interest in her. She was all alone in the new country, desperately trying to become a French queen, yet everyone saw only her Austrian background, and so on. No wonder she was sort of diverting her energy and activity towards the things she knew better and loved the most: parties, dancing, fashion and looks. Of course, this way she fed the beast of public gossiping and disapproval. The tattles went so far that she was openly accused of adultery, both with men and women, as well as the extreme ostentatious spending on bagatelle, all the bells and whistles in the times when the country was going through the toughest economic troubles in its history. Yet she didn't feel where the wind blows and couldn't care less. And that was her biggest mistake, which we talked about in my previous videos, particularly about the one with the necklace.
That's awful. Can't you do something?
I'm not going to acknowledge it.
Welcome to my little village. I love it here. It's my heaven.
Or take the Pearl of Versailles estate, the Petit Trianon and the Queen's Hamlet. This rustic paradise with ponds, vegetable gardens and provincial village-style buildings created the atmosphere of the simple and down-to-earth countryside, where the Queen, together with her close friends, could indulge herself in a simple, slow living in a peaceful environment, surrounded by nothing but nature, totally in line with the ideals of enlightenment, out of the strict order and protocol of the royal palace. Alas, in her internal exile, she totally neglected her role as the queen of this country. The country that was going through some fundamental changes the whole Western civilization was going through at some point. The age of enlightenment enlightened everyone, and people of all social strata felt differently and had different and new expectations of what their life should be. Alas, the immature royal couple wasn't able to listen and actually hear the voice of the crowd, the zeitgeist in other words. No wonder that the Queen's Hamlet, the seemingly innocent endeavor of hers, was labeled by her contemporaries as the place where they spent tons of money to make it look poor. Wasn't the angry crowd right? Perhaps it was, yet interestingly, looks like Marie Antoinette was also leaning toward the ideals of the New World without actually acknowledging it herself. She grew to hate the lavish and pretentious court. She searched for simplicity in every part of her life, from relations to dresses. As opposed to what was told in pamphlets and caricatures, she valued her family and kids the most. I particularly enjoyed this moment in Marie Antoinette movie where they showed this change made to her famous portrait with her kids by the fabulous female painter Elisabeth Vigée-Lebrun. Do you spot some strange detail in the composition? It's the cradle her eldest son Louis-Joseph is pointing to. It's empty. It was first occupied by her 11-month-old daughter, Sophie Béatrice, who suddenly died at this young age. Marie Antoinette asked to repaint the portrait, leaving the cradle empty as a symbol of mourning and pain. Her close friends recalled in their memoirs how she was deeply hurt by that and future losses of her children and kept grieving for them until her last days. And yes, together with the king, they even adopted 4 more children. So it's amazing how she managed to keep that duality of her true self against her image in front of the public. Even her own mother started critiquing Marie Antoinette for her allegedly improper behavior and lack of political sense when it came both to local and international affairs. Oh, really? Mother, where were you when I was brought up as a pretty little flower who needed to care only about how I looked and how to please everyone? Indeed, Marie Antoinette was growing up as a decorative piece without serious education for the future queen. she has remained that little girl who just couldn't stop acting the way she always did and change when the world had changed. She was simply incapable of doing so. Everything in her story is in fact a combination of circumstances that weren't criminal by themselves, but that formed an ensemble of archetypes and prejudices she fell victim to. Prejudices. Her definitive drawback that she shared with the king was the failure to actually feel what was going on and adapt quickly. Somehow they seem to haven't understood the gravity of the events of the unfolding revolution and kept taking wrong decisions and making foolish statements. Alas, the outcome was brutal. They failed to flee the country. They kept naively dreaming of reinstating their rule. But for what? They didn't need those absolute powers themselves, yet somehow kept insisting on it, believing that their foreign allies would help them to win back France and counter revolution. And here is when she did become that monster she was painted in caricatures right from the first day she set foot on French soil. Despite trying to breathe in the same rhythm as their country, she writes to her brothers, then the kings of Spain and Austria, and to her other foreign friends, asking for their help to reinstate back the old order in France. They ask for the troops to lead the counter-revolution and at the same time have nothing to put on the table as an alternative for their country. She just wants everything to be back her way, acting like a child and thinking of walking over everyone. She even writes that in her letters to her foreign confidants. By the tragic end of her reign, or better to say, being the Queen of France, she has indeed become the foreigner she was long believed to be. At the end of the day, the trap of absolute monarchy gave the king all the powers, and at the same time, all the paths led to the royal family when anything went wrong in society. And there and then, pretty much everything was going out of control. At the same time, it all doesn't justify the cruelty they faced, and they've been caught and separated with their small kids and put in prison, especially when it came to Marie Antoinette. The final trial was absolutely unlawful. The accusations were absurd and as if designed to feed the beast of the crowd anger. It wasn't fair, and her behavior and answers in the court even won her last sympathies of the Parisian public. Yet once again, that was too late. On 16th October 1793, the court jury proclaimed her the enemy of the French nation and sentenced to death for high treason. She in turn said she was nothing more than a wife to the king and she had to obey him in every step he took. She couldn't summarize it better. That was exactly who she was, and obviously it wasn't enough for the role and the time in history she was destined to find herself in. The woman who had honors without power, the queen was executed the very same day, 18 days before her 38th birthday. Oh, and who were those notorious friends who surrounded her in scandalous rumors and shared her drastic faith? We'll look at them in my future videos about the tales of the French court. Thank you for following me in the sort of amateur psychoanalysis of the Queen and her times. I hope it provoked some reflections on her fateful role and tragic path with you as well. I'll be curious to read what you think down there in the comments. And yes, have a great day and I hope to see you in my other videos. Bye bye!